From the Swiss Alps to the Canadian Rockies, celebrating unique connections between Switzerland and Canada. Brought to you by the Swiss representations in Canada. Welcome to From the Alps to the Rockies. Today we're going to get moving. We're going to be with dancer and choreographer Janyce Michellod. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
So Janyce, you're currently visiting Vancouver to teach here and to do research. You arrived about 2 weeks ago.
Exactly.
What are your first impressions?
Well, I love Vancouver. It's really a city of my heart. Every time I'm here, I'm loving my experience. I'm loving the people and the scenery and the vibe of the city. It's really wonderful. So I'm very happy to be back here and sharing my knowledge and my experience with the dance community here. First at the university and also to professional dancers for the morning training, the professional training.
So you're here in partnership with the Simon Fraser University, their School for the Contemporary Arts. You also teach at the Training Society in Vancouver, and we from the consulate are very happy to also be a partner of your programming here. Can you tell us a little bit about your program in Vancouver? So what exactly do you do in terms of research and teaching?
So I've been starting last week teaching classes, technical classes at the university. So my work is teaching improvisation, different strategies for improvisation or instant composition in dance. And I'm teaching also ballet because I'm coming from a ballet background, and usually it is true, I like to combine that, teaching impro and teaching ballet, because my work is really linking the two, which can be perceived as two extremes, but in my opinion, they can be connected. And when we feel the connection between those two practices, it's really wonderful because it creates a bridge and it includes all the other practices in it. So I'm teaching also about the conditioning. So it really is a practice to maximize the strength and work on flexibility, on mobility of joints. I like to share this with younger dancers in order for them to have tools to prevent injuries, to understand how they can support their training outside of their curriculum, outside of the class, what they should do in the morning, what they should do in the cool down in the evening. So it's really giving them tools to support their busy days and to prevent, any massive injuries so that they can hope for longer career and healthier bodies.
Absolutely. And how was your experience with the students here? Are they open to do all the things you make them do?
Yes, they are, and they are very warm and welcoming and sharing their interest, asking many questions, staying after class, being really curious and interested in the practice, in my background as well. Of course, also they're curious about Europe because many of them never had the chance to perhaps travel to Europe and see also the dance in Europe. So they're also curious about, how it feels to be a dancer in Europe, how it works, what is the dynamic of the scene. And so it's a very rich exchange. I'm enjoying a lot, and I found them so generous also with their feedback and their appreciation, like it's real and it feels very welcoming.
Wonderful. You mentioned it before, you have a bit of a background in both classical dance but also contemporary. Could you walk us through your journey a little bit, where you started and where you are now in terms of dance?
Yes, to make a long story short, I began dance when I was really a small kid, so 3-4 years old. I started with ballet in Valais, like in Valais, from where I'm from, and then I moved to Geneva to continue my studying in ballet technique, and then finally arrived in Zurich when I was 15 to study at what it is now the TAS, the Tanz Academy Zurich, and at the time it was called Schweizerisches Ballettberufsschule, which was in partnership with the Zürcher Ballet, the company. So we would often perform with the company. So yeah, that is my experience. And then later on, I performed also with the National Ballet of Cuba when they were in Europe touring. So that was also a very inspiring moments as ballerina. I enjoy ballet very much. And I just felt at one point that the professional life within the frame of a company was not what I was first expected or expecting when I was studying. And I decided that I wanted to experience something else out of this dance field. So I went back to school in Codarts in the Netherlands, in Rotterdam, studied there, had my bachelor in performing arts there, and I began really there to have improvisation. That was my first time, going with improvisation. And the teachers that I had there in Codarts were so inspiring. They made me really want to do that and only that. So I perform in some choreographed, like really set material, contemporary dance. But most of the pieces I've danced, most of the pieces I took part in were improvised, so structure, improvised work. Yeah.
Maybe we need to explain this a little bit more, because when we talk about improvisational dance, that doesn't mean that you just do whatever you want on stage. There are rules to improvisation. Maybe you can explain a little bit more what it is.
Well, if you would compare with the musical world, it would be like what jazz musicians do with improvisation. So there is always like a theme. There is always a concept you are improvising on. So you're developing something specific. You're developing an idea. You're developing a concept. You're developing a narrative, even if it's abstract. But there is really a story to be told there. So it is interesting to acknowledge that there are many different approaches to improvise work. Different people work in different ways. But yeah, like most of the time you have a structure, more or less rigid, depending on who is structuring the work. And you can improvise the work. Or you instant compose as well. So there are really those two approaches. And for me, I've been doing the two types. So really like you have a structure. You know where you should start, you know where you should end, you know what is the narrative you should develop in your dance, you know the tools, so the meaning you work on how is that you're going to develop through your movements in relationship to time and space, like what is that, like the process of your solo or of your piece. And you practice this in the rehearsal, you research on the language, meaning the vocabulary of your dance, what sort of movement is appropriate for the concept, so it's really like you shaping your project, you working on those tools, meanings like you're working on the strategies of how you want develop the concept behind your work, and then you perform it. And instant composition is really like similar as music would be. So you're really developing around elements that are coming back again, like in a song, like you have some certain harmony that come back, you have certain words that will come back. Then instant composition is really to be perceived like this. So there is much more repetition than perhaps in improvised work. And there is like an idea of coming back and developing, like if you would have a variation A, B, and A plus and B plus in music, so it gives that feeling of development.
And what is it that really fascinates you about improvisational dance?
It's the complexity of it. I found this intriguing, challenging, motivating, like the complex position you are in when you start performing also in improvisation work, because you're in the instant moment and you have to choose. So the choice making is an important aspect, because you have to choose now and right now what decisions what are you choosing to do, what are you choosing not to do, for what reasons. So like, is it coming from a place of confidence, of lack of confidence, of over arrogancy, or like lack of courage in certain moments. It somehow it brings you back to yourself. as a human, as a person, as an individual, and it brings you back to your own issue. It brings you back to your strength as well and abilities. So I think it's really like, it makes me connect to me and myself and my development as a human again and again. And I find this quite fascinating because it can also, the dance can then evolve. It can change with you, and you can also see the long journey, you know, and from where you start and where you go. And I found it's very, very enthusiastic as a practice. And
Wonderful.
just being there in the moment, you know, like trying to be as present as possible in the real time. And that is, only improvisation can give you that feeling, because when you work on the step, like when you work on choreograph pieces, you know what to expect, right? You've been working, so you're on top of it for sure, but it's a very different way of performing and feeling the movement, because you know what to expect and you know that you've been working well for that result, you know, to be perfection or to be beautiful or to be whatever it needs to be. But when you improvise, you've been working a lot in the studio, but you never know. You know, sometimes it might happen, the magic might be there, and some performances you go out of stage and you know you haven't been there, you haven't been present, you've been projecting, you've been feeling maybe the failure of your piece, so you have been in and out of that moment for different reasons. So yeah, it's like you work hard, but the result might not be what you expect. And that is a challenge that I like very much.
Yeah, that you have to create anew every time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then, of course, if people now wonder what it all looks like, we're going to link some videos to your dance in the description of the podcast, so people can have a look of what that can look like, actually. And the field of improvisational dance really became your area of expertise as well, and your research on ethics.
Yeah.
You're trying to set up ethical frameworks within improvisation. What does that exactly mean, and what can it look like?
Yeah. So I've been fascinated by, like, in improvisation work, most of the time, again, not always, but most of the time, you have individuals responsible for different actions and reaction on stage. So you have leaderships. So you might be the dancer deciding when the space needs to be shifted, or the time needs to be shifted. So you might be the one deciding on change of tempo, you know, like running or slowing down or stopping, or like, I'm just giving like examples that are easier to perceive or to understand. So, but then most of the time you have a leader or few leaders. And I was curious to see what if there would be a microcosmos on stage, like a little society on stage that could decide as a collective. So normal leadership, but all the decisions would be taken from within, you know what I mean, from the group, from the collective mind. And I think my Swiss nationality, of course, is one of the big reasons of that research, because I think we are a nation of collective, you know, of cooperation, of understanding, of trying to be a little bit more horizontal as well with the relationship we have within a certain power structure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I was fascinating, like, can I imagine a strategy, a rule in improvisation that would allow everyone to have the feeling to just be horizontal? And what does it mean when you want to actually create things? So I've decided to look into different work, you know, like philosophy work and sociology work and anthropologic work, like different research. And I came with a strategy, and I came up with a strategy that allows everybody to follow each other. So everybody has the same feeling on stage, that you following somebody else, but everybody gets that feeling. So you actually don't really know who you're following, because everybody is following each other. And what I found was very intriguing with this is that it creates a frame where everybody is recreative. So, because one of the big pressure when you are an improviser is to be creative, right? Yeah. Because you need instantly to have the best idea, to have the idea, to be the dancer. Like, there is a lot of pressure on thinking you need to be that dancer. And for me, it was sometimes really frightening. Like you go on stage and you think like, am I going to be able to hold on to this creativity? Yeah. Or maybe tonight I don't feel so creative, you know, because you have days with it and days without it. And within that structure, that rules of ethic for improvisation, you don't need anymore that fear, because you are recreative. That means you are transforming and you are rebounding on somebody else's creativity. So it makes you work on changing your perspective. Are you able to see what is that you see? Are you able to perceive the greatness of other people? And are you able to feel inspired by other people, by your colleagues? Mm-hmm. And if you are practicing this, if you're practicing like, what do I love about that move? What do I love about that action? What do I appreciate about this, you know, statement? And you are able to rebound on it and transform it and metamorphose it within your own creative mind. Yeah. Then you are giving a result and you're giving a movement or you're giving an action that you feel is not entirely yours. So you don't have the responsibility as such as finding that. We have the responsibility of making it creative. And I found it was, for me, life-changing as an experience on stage, as being in the moment with open eyes, ready to look at my colleagues and ready to be inspired, instead of finding this inspiration only in myself, but finding inspiration on other people. And it also did change the relationship I would then have with my colleagues. Because when you are busy approaching the relationship with your colleagues with the only perspective of finding them inspiring, you look for that blessing, right? You look for that light, and that is really it was life-changing for me. So that's the ethic rule. Somehow it's like everybody is recycling information instead of creating the new information, rebounding on each other's idea, and it having this ethic of work also in the process, because it makes you as an individual much more generous, you know, Absolutely. And less afraid as well, because in improvisation there is a lot of fear, of course, like I was mentioning before, and a lot of trust issue, therefore. Mm-hmm. And when you feel like your colleagues are only there to support your idea and to make them better, every idea is an idea, mm-hmm. right? Every idea is a great idea, because potentially it's going to be being transformed by somebody else's brain, and just the true potential of your idea is going to be then, you know, taking place. And that is really nice.
This actually, your explanations remind me of improvisational comedy, where this happens a lot. Somebody starts a sketch and then other people come in, and there this transition happens very clearly. They tap each other on the shoulder and say, now I take over. And then the story goes on with somebody else. So is that basically the same mechanism then in dance?
It is. Yeah. But instead of like falling on each other, you are doing it at the same mm-hmm. time. Mm-hmm. So there is like a moment of, I mean, you could potentially go after each other, but like in the pieces I did made with that strategy, you go together at the same time.
And how was it trying to implement this new structure in dance? Was it welcomed with open arms, or are there still people who are skeptical about it?
I think both, but like this strategy it took form actually in one of the pieces I made. That was part of the Tanzplan Germany in 2009. And the concept of the piece was actually about responsibility. And therefore, I started with that strategy. And then I started to teach that strategy. And at the time, I feel like it was a niche, you know, like some people would be interested in it, some people wouldn't. Yeah. And 10 years later, I think also because the new generation of dancer, they want something else. They don't want a power, like they don't want these power games anymore. They really want a horizontal relationship, and they want something else. They expect something else also from the work environment and from the process, and they want to be engaged differently. And now it is a big hit. So like, because I think the generation that the young dancers now, they want something like this. They want to learn about some strategies like that, because they connect to the concept behind it. More cooperation, more collective, more togetherness, less competition, or competition not in that negative way, but like more like, let's inspire each other. So they're much more connected to this, to the essence of this strategy. So now it is much more vibrant, and it's actually, I'm teaching that strategy much more at universities.
So really, you're really part of innovation in the area of dance and improvisation.
Yeah.
And of course, you came here to Vancouver to share your knowledge and to teach here. Did you also find some things that are different and in Europe that you will also take back home?
Yeah, I think like the generosity of the dancers, not to say that in Europe we're not generous as a field, but here it's very extremely welcoming. The dancers are so appreciative of somebody from Europe coming, because many of them don't have the opportunity to travel to Europe. So they have a very small window about like what is happening, what sort of dancer in Europe, what sort of work, what sort of focus of work. And that is really nice they're so enthusiastic. It's really such a motivation, you know, like I really want to do the best I can, because you have like happy faces and shiny eyes, and they're wanting to learn, and they're wanting to really have this exchange, and they're so curious, and they take notes. And so it's it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
Great.
Very a lot of it's very rewarding.
That is wonderful to hear. And you only have a few more classes to teach before you go back to Switzerland or to France, where you live at the moment. So you're going to have some more student classes and also classes with professionals. And then you head back to Europe. And then what is next for you? What are your upcoming projects?
So I'm gonna go back to Europe and go on with teaching. So I teach again in like regularly in the same universities, which this goes on again. And artistically, I would like to start again a different kind of relation and project. And I'm really curious about developing a practice to perform in museums. So in relationship with visual art again, or architectures. Like I'm fascinated by space in general. Yeah. Like architectures plays a big role in my inspiration. And of course, visual art has always been part of my project. I love it. And I would like now to establish some new relationship to perform in such a setup. Yeah, that's my new aim, my new desire.
Exciting projects ahead then.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Janyce, for visiting us here in Vancouver. We're really, really happy that this worked out and you were able to come here to teach. And thank you for taking the time for the interview as well.
Thank you so much for having me here, and thank you for making this possible. Thank you so much for your support.